Good afternoon, everyone. All right, we are on the record in the matter of State of Midlands versus Avery Bancroft. This is matter number CR 2015-05-0803. May we have the appearances for the attorneys for the people, please?
Yes, Your Honor. My name is William Rogers. To my right is Jaleesa Harris.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
She will be giving the closing argument in today's case. And to my far right is Christopher Grant.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
He will be giving the opening statement for today's case.
Okay, thank you.
Today we have a party representative, and that is one Mickey Keene.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Keenan. Thank you. Have a seat. May we have appearances on the record for counsel for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Hope Keene, and I, along with my co-counsel, Alicia Lai,
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
and Maggie O'Rourke,
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
will be representing the defendant, Mr. Avery Bancroft.
Good afternoon, Your
Good
Honor.
afternoon. We will have the record reflect that the defendant is in the room. Have a seat. While we're on the record, but before we bring in the jury, I did want to note that we will consider any evidentiary discussions that we're going to have on objections as being constructively at sidebar. All right?
Yes,
Each
sir.
time. Thank you.
We do have some pretrial matters to attend to.
Okay?
We would like to now enter the, for Your Honor's reference, Midland's rules of evidence, the intent to offer character evidence, the Midland's case law, the order on motion to strike expert testimony, the penal code, the jury instructions, the indictment, the bill of particulars, the stipulations, and special instructions. May I approach closing counsel?
Yes, please.
Approach your bench.
Yes.
At this time, we would now like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses except for party representatives. In today's case, Mickey Keenan is our party representative.
Any objections?
No, Your Honor, we just ask that that's also attributed to our defendant and party representative, Avery Bancroft.
It will be extended and without objection, so ordered.
Lastly, Your Honor, we would like to know, you previously stated that you would, we have freedom to move out the well, but approaching witnesses and opposing counsel, would you like us to ask first?
You can go ahead and approach opposing counsel. We'll use our own judgment as whether you intend to strike them when you do so. As far as approaching the witness goes, yes, please ask the bench for permission to do that.
Yes, Your Honor. With that, we are ready to do that.
Okay, does the defense have anything pre-trial before we bring in the jury?
No, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
With that, let's have the jury brought in. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. We will now have opening statements by counsel for the people.
Christopher Grant for the prosecution. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. It was Avery Bancroft's choice. Today, you are going to hear about how the defendant in today's case, Avery Bancroft, the owner of the Black Bear Casino, bribed the chair of the Midlands Gambling Commission, Chase Covington, in exchange for the chair's vote for his proposal. When the Midlands Gambling Commission announced that they were ready to issue a new casino license in the state of Midlands, this started a 7.5-month process in which each candidate made their proposal and submitted it to the Gambling Commission in hopes of being awarded a new casino license in Midlands. But members of the jury, you will learn that in today's case, it was the defendant who was awarded this casino license due to the fact that he unlawfully bribed the chair of the Midlands Gambling Commission in exchange for the chair's vote for his proposal. The defendant already admits to giving money to the chair of the Gambling Commission in exchange for the commissioner's vote for his proposal. The case that we have before us today is a case of blame, as the defendant tries to accuse Officer Mickey Keenan of entrapment in an attempt to avoid the consequences of his own actions. But members of the jury, this is not true. The defendant made this decision. The defendant bribed the chair of the Gambling Commission. It was Avery Bancroft's choice. We as the prosecution bear a burden of proof to you today. We must prove that the defendant, Avery Bancroft, was predisposed to commit bribery, and we must do this beyond a reasonable doubt. By beyond a reasonable doubt, I mean that beyond doubt based on any reason or common sense, that the defendant made this bribe out of his own free will. Now the defense will come up to you and tell you that this is a very high burden, but we as the prosecution will meet this burden in today's case. The defense comes to trial and they carry a burden of proof themselves as well. They must prove their burden by a preponderance of the evidence. This means that they must prove that it is more likely than not that undercover detective Mickey Keenan entrapped Avery Bancroft to make this bribe to the chair of the Gambling Commission. Following opposing counsel's opening statements, you will be hearing from our first witness in today's case, Officer Mickey Keenan. Officer Mickey Keenan is the undercover detective who investigated this case. Officer Keenan will come before you, and he will tell you that when he started his investigation, he was not investigating Avery Bancroft, but rather the Midlands Gambling Commission itself. He will tell you that he only began investigating Avery Bancroft when he heard a suspicious phone call between the defendant and the chair of the Gambling Commission, and which raised his suspicions that a possible bribery could be taking place. Officer Keenan will also tell you about a meeting that he took place in that happened on April 13th, which the defendant negotiated the bribe with the chair of the Gambling Commission. He will tell you that the defendant wrote on a napkin, "Yes" equals $250,000, and the Gambling Commissioner accepted that napkin. Members of the jury, this is predisposition to commit bribery. Second, we will be calling linguist Dr. Reese Warren. Dr. Warren will testify that undercover detective Mickey Keenan operated his investigation sufficiently to police standards. He will tell you that Officer Keenan followed proper undercover protocol and that he simply presented the defendant with the opportunity. But in the end, it was Avery Bancroft's choice, and he bribed the chair of the Midlands Gambling Commission. Lastly, we will be calling a bellhop from the defendant's own Black Bear Casino. His name is Devin Del Sesto, and he will testify about hearing the defendant Avery Bancroft in a phone call in mid-February, in which the defendant said, "If you're for sale, I am willing to buy." Del Sesto will also go on to tell you that on April 16th, he noticed that the chair of the Gambling Commission, Chase Covington, walked out of the casino with Avery Bancroft's briefcase. Members of the jury, throughout this trial, we as the prosecution want you to keep one thing in mind, that it was Avery Bancroft's choice. She wanted a casino license, and she received one. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Jaleesa Harris, will ask that you find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have the opening statement by the defense, please.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. This bribe was Keenan's crime. Now, the prosecution just stood up here and told you a story, one about a scheming businessman, secret meetings, and a whole lot of cash. But like most stories, what the prosecution told you was exaggerated, speculative, and far from the truth. Now, there's one thing that we must make clear today. We're not contesting that a bribe occurred, but rather what this case hinges on is how behind the scenes it was Mickey Keenan pulling the strings. Now, the prosecution has the highest possible burden of proof in this case. That means they must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Bancroft was predisposed to bribery and that it was entirely his plan, his idea to exchange cash for Mrs. Covington's vote. prosecution won't be able to meet that burden of proof today. That's because this isn't a simple cut and dry case of bribery. This is a case of entrapment. Because Mr. Bancroft was encouraged, induced, and coerced into bribing Mrs. Covington, something he never would have even thought of if not for Mickey Keenan. And now, Mickey Keenan, well, he's smart. He knows that when he's caught, the step back, wipe his hands clean. So in the prosecution story, he can play the hero. He can wear the white hat. He can be the successful investigator who just caught a big fish. As the defense today, we take on a lighter burden of proof. That means we need only show by simple preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Bancroft was not predisposed to bribery, and that it was the government that induced the bribe to occur. Now, today you'll also hear from Mr. Bancroft himself. He'll tell you of his extensive experience in the casino business. He knew how to make a successful casino, how to make money, how to make the customers happy, how to give back to the community. So when Mrs. Covington found 2 casino proposals on her desk, it was clear that Mr. Bancroft's was the better one. So Mr. Bancroft had no reason to bribe anybody. But that didn't sit well with Mickey Keenan. He needed something big to impress the police chief with. So he made it up. He made up the results to an unauthorized investigation. Now today, you'll also hear from Dr. J.D. Lorian, a forensic auditor who analyzed this investigation. He'll tell you that Mickey Keenan didn't have the authorization to even start this investigation. And why is that? Because the state had no evidence whatsoever that Mr. Bancroft was predisposed to bribery. And when Mickey Keenan barged forth with his investigation, he didn't even do it right. He violated the undercover operations guidelines. He planted the idea of a bribe and coerced Mr. Bancroft into executing the act. And lastly, you'll also hear from Mr. Corey Hyde, Mr. Bancroft's executive assistant, who will tell you how things took a turn for the worse when he met Mickey Keenan, and how Mr. Hyde couldn't extract himself from the situation without jeopardizing his own security. Now, members of the jury, all this is textbook entrapment. Mickey Keenan might work closely with casinos, but Mickey Keenan does not gamble. He left nothing to chance. He recruited help. He laid the plan. He made Bancroft do his bidding. And when the state finally closed the investigation, Mickey Keenan jumped back, pointed a finger at Mr. Bancroft, said the devil did it all. But members of the jury, remember, this was Keenan's crime. And at the end of this trial, what the evidence will show, and what the scales of justice will demand, is that Mr. Avery Bancroft be found not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you.